There's a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from working too hard or sleeping too little. It comes from a conversation, a recurring one, with a specific person. You walk away from it feeling like you said too much, explained too much, gave too much, and somehow still came out looking like the problem, like you owe something you can't quite name, like you need to go back and clarify, try again, say it better this time. And you will, because you always do. That loop, that particular specific exhaustion, is not a communication failure. It is not a personality clash. It is not a sign that you need to find better words. It is a system, and you are the resource it runs on. What's up, everyone? It's Soluna. Welcome back to Soluna versus the System. Today, we are going somewhere most relationship advice refuses to go. Not how to communicate with difficult people, not what to say when someone upsets you, but why certain dynamics are structurally designed to consume your clarity and convert it into someone else's leverage. I'm calling this the access economy, and once you see it, the specific people in your life who operate inside it, you will understand a pattern that has probably been draining you for years without a name. Let's get into it. Concept number 1, the access economy. Every relationship has an implicit economy. There's something being exchanged: time, energy, vulnerability, attention. In healthy dynamics, the exchange is roughly mutual. In others, the exchange is lopsided in ways that aren't obvious until you look at the structure, not just the surface. The access economy is a specific kind of lopsided dynamic where one person's emotional stability depends on unrestricted entry into another person's inner world. Not love, not closeness, access. The ability to enter your emotional space whenever they need to know what you're thinking, to understand your reasoning, to have a window into your doubts, your fears, your guilt, your hope. Here's why this matters. In a healthy relationship, your vulnerability creates intimacy. In the access economy, your vulnerability creates inventory, a collection of emotional data points that can be referenced later, not to understand you, but to navigate around your limits. You share your insecurity about your career. Months later, when you try to set a boundary, suddenly your professional worth is part of the argument. You explain your anxiety about conflict. Later, your discomfort with confrontation becomes the leverage that keeps you compliant. Your honesty was not a bridge. It was a database. Concept number 2, the clarity tax. Here is the first counterintuitive insight in today's video, and I want you to sit with it. Certain people do not want you to be confused. They want you to be almost clear, just clear enough to keep engaging, not clear enough to stop. I call this the clarity tax. Every time you come close to a firm position, there's a charge, a new question, a new angle, a new concern that suddenly needs addressing before the conversation can move forward. But what did you mean exactly by that? I just need to understand where this is coming from. Can you explain what I specifically did wrong? These sound like reasonable requests for clarity, but watch what happens when you provide the clarity. The conversation doesn't resolve. It generates a new question, another angle, another layer to unpack. Because the goal was never resolution, the goal was continuation. And your willingness to keep explaining, to keep paying the clarity tax, is what funds the continuation. The moment you recognize this pattern, something shifts. You stop treating every unanswered question as a communication failure on your part. You start asking a different question. Whose confusion is actually being served here? Concept number 3, the signal flip. Now let's talk about what happens when you stop paying the clarity tax, because this is the part that has confused and often gaslit more people than almost anything else in difficult relationships. When you reduce your explanations, when you answer once and hold the position, when you stop filling silence with reassurance, the other person's behavior changes, and the change looks, on the surface, like proof that you did something wrong. They become hurt, withdrawn, confused, frustrated. They tell others you've changed. They frame your clarity as coldness. They treat your boundary as an attack. Most people, when they see this reaction, interpret it as a signal. My boundary caused pain. Pain means I was wrong. I should explain myself and repair this. That is the signal flip. The reaction to your clarity gets misread as evidence against your clarity. But here's what the signal actually means. When someone escalates after you become less available, not more available, less available, you are watching a system lose its power source. The escalation is not grief. It is friction, the friction of an apparatus that relied on your perpetual engagement suddenly encountering resistance. Grief says, I miss you. The access economy says, I miss what you gave me. These two things can look identical from the outside. The difference is in what follows. Grief can survive a no. The access economy cannot. Concept number 4, the compliance architecture. Let's go deeper, because this dynamic doesn't arrive fully formed. It gets built piece by piece over time. I call this the compliance architecture, the set of expectations, reactions, and emotional consequences that trains you to explain yourself continuously. It usually starts with a simple observation. When you explain thoroughly, the tension dissolves. When you stay brief, things get uncomfortable. So the rational thing to do is keep explaining. You're not being manipulated, you're responding to an incentive structure. Over time, this becomes automatic. You explain before being asked. You anticipate objections. You pre-justify your decisions. You translate your own feelings into language designed to be palatable to someone else's reaction. And eventually, your own inner voice starts sounding like a lawyer preparing a case for your right to feel what you feel. That is not communication. That is trained self-erasure. You have internalized the architecture so deeply that you no longer need someone to question you. You question yourself on their behalf. This is why when you finally try to set a limit, it feels dangerous from the inside. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you have been structurally conditioned to experience your own clarity as a threat to the relationship. The compliance architecture made your limits feel like betrayals, even to you. The unexpected insight. Here is the contrarian idea I promised you. Most advice about difficult relationships focuses on what to say, better phrasing, clearer communication, more assertive language, and that advice misses the entire mechanism. In the access economy, the content of your explanation is largely irrelevant. What matters is that you explained. What matters is that you engaged. What matters is that you stayed in the loop, kept the channel open, remained available for the next round. A perfect explanation is still an explanation, and every explanation, no matter how well crafted, signals something. I am still here. I am still trying. I am still working to be understood by you. That signal is what matters, not the words. This is why people in these dynamics often feel like no amount of clarity ever resolves anything. It's not because they need better clarity. It's because the purpose of the conversation was never resolution. The purpose was engagement, and every clarification, however perfect, delivered exactly what was needed to keep the dynamic running. So the actual shift is not finding better words, it is reconsidering whether words are the right tool at all.
What actually changes things? Now, what do you do with this? First, understand that reducing your explanation is not cruelty. It is not coldness. It is not a communication failure. It is the removal of a resource from a system that was consuming it. What you experience as withdrawal, the dynamic experiences as disruption. Second, learn to distinguish between the two types of discomfort that follow a limit. There is the discomfort of someone who is genuinely hurt and needs time to process, and there is the discomfort of a system losing access. One gets quieter over time. The other escalates, recruits, reframes, and eventually demands that you justify your limit indefinitely. The direction of the reaction tells you which one you're dealing with. Third, Rebuild your relationship with your own internal certainty. The compliance architecture worked by making your own clarity feel unstable, like it needed external validation to be real. Part of healing from this dynamic is learning to hold a position without requiring the other person's agreement to make it valid. Your no does not need their understanding to be real. Your limit does not need their approval to be legitimate. Your clarity does not need to survive their cross-examination to be true. Fourth, and this is specific, practice the art of the unremarkable response. Not dramatic, not long, not detailed. That doesn't work for me. My answer is the same. I'm not going into this further. Not as a performance of strength, as a neutral statement of position. The less emotionally textured your response, the less surface there is for the dynamic to grip. Flat is not cold. Flat is just finished. Here is what I want you to leave with today. The exhaustion you've been feeling is not because you're bad at communicating. It's not because you haven't found the right words yet. It's because you have been operating inside a system that was built to convert your honesty into someone else's leverage. The access economy runs on your availability, your emotional presence, your detailed explanations, your willingness to keep working toward a resolution that was never the actual goal. When you reduce that availability, the system reacts. And the reaction looks at first like proof that you caused harm. That reaction is the signal flip. Don't read it as a verdict on your behavior. Read it as data about the dynamic. Because here is the truth about the access economy. It only functions when you keep funding it. The moment you stop, not dramatically, just stop, you find out what the relationship was actually built on. And sometimes that answer is the most important information you will ever receive about that person. Watch who can survive your clarity. Watch who cannot. That distinction will tell you more about your situation than anything I or anyone could put into words. If this reframed something real for you, drop a comment and tell me which concept hit hardest. I read every single one. See you in the next one.